Hello, welcome to my latest video. My name is Sue McNiven and I'm a spinning teacher. I have been teaching now for some 29 years and I've taught at lots of different guilds throughout the UK and also 5 years worth of spinning tuition at Berkshire College of Agriculture. So over the years I've picked up quite a lot of different techniques. So today we're going to look at plying, and plying for me is the finishing of your yarn. So if you spent a lot of time spinning your singles, the last thing you want to do is to ply it in a way that actually ruins it. So we're going to look at balancing yarns today, and I'll show you my method, and we'll also look at 2 plies, 3 plies, 4 ply cabled yarns, and also Navajo plying and a little bit of Peruvian plying as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video, and I'm just going to get the wheels set up and we'll get started. Right, to begin plying we need to have a little bit of equipment. So first of all we need a lazy Kate, and your lazy Kate is there as a bobbin holder. So basically it just needs to be smooth running so that the yarns will peel off nicely when you're ready to ply them. So on this one I've got 2 bobbins with a little bit of yarn on, and on the spinning wheel I've got a bobbin that's pretty much empty and ready for the plied yarn to be put onto it. So we're going to have a look at how I ply, and plying really is about finishing your yarn, and I think a lot of people think this is just the stage that you rush through to get your singles finished and actually have a finished yarn to work with. But the balancing of your yarn is really important, because the balancing is what makes your knitted garments hang straight. If you're knitting in stocking stitch, it's really important that your yarns are straight before you actually knit them. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 2, 3, 4 ply, whatever, the yarn needs to be balanced properly if it's going to hang straight. Now the only difference between a fully balanced yarn and one that isn't balanced is that the twist in each of the components can be different, and fancy yarns rely on those factors to make them work, and that very nature of it means that some of your fancy yarns are not balanced. So we have to find different ways of using them. So to balance your yarn properly, you have to have 2 singles which are evenly spun and have the same amount of twist in them. If they have unequal amounts of twist, it's virtually impossible to balance them properly. So having good quality singles is what it's all about to start with. If, for instance, your single spinning is not wonderful, you can actually make it somewhat better with good quality plying. But equally so, if you've got really good singles, you can ruin it if your plying isn't so good. So, we're going to work on singles that are good quality singles, and I'll show you my method of balancing it, and I'm just going to show you a little exercise that I use that will demonstrate that for you. Okay, so in order to show you exactly what I mean about fibre running straight up the length of the twist, I've got 2 different colours of pre-drafted fibre, and I'm going to just twist these together. And actually this is a very good way of showing just how important it is that your singles are even in the thickness and the amount of twist to be able to have a truly balanced yarn. With the best will in the world, we're not machines, so we do the best we can. Sometimes it works really well and sometimes it doesn't. So we're just going to build a little bit of twist and let this run in. So you can see this barber shop pole type effect coming through. Okay, so once you put that twist in, you can see that the 2 colours are twisting around each other in this single thread, so they represent the twist in the fibre. If I draw this off and double it back, if you look at those 2 threads together, you can see just how difficult it is to actually get 2 single threads to be exactly the same, with the same degree of twist and the same thickness. You can see little inconsistencies here and there where the twist is maybe a little bit tighter than others. So we're just going to let that ply back on itself so that it is automatically balanced. Now if you look at this plied yarn, you can see, if you follow one of the colours, you can see how they run straight up and down the length of the yarn. So that is the individual fibre running straight. Here's a close-up of that one just so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So if you follow one or other of the colours, you can see it runs straight up the length. It's not going spiralled round and round it. So if we look at that as a single thread again before it's been plied, the two different colours. So the fibre is spiralling round and then it's plied and the fibre is running straight even though the twist is still going around. Okay, so now we're going to look at producing a two-plied yarn. So because we want this yarn to be balanced, it's important that we have the right amount of plying twist put in to balance the two singles. Now if you don't have a sample of the freshly spun yarn that you've allowed to ply back on itself, then it's not really guesswork as to how much twist you put in. There is a specific amount that is necessary. So I have here two singles of alpaca which have been spun a few days ago, so they are somewhat set on the bobbin. I've attached them to a leader on the spinning wheel and I'm going to start turning this in an anti-clockwise direction as the singles have been spun in a clockwise. Now, because you want the ply to be nice and even, and ideally you want the ply to look as if it's making a properly finished yarn, it's not just two threads that happen to be wrapped around each other. To enable this to happen, you've got to think about how twist works, and twist in its nature of itself, it actually jumps the thick bits and tightens up the thin bits. So anywhere where you've got any inconsistencies in your yarn, you'll tend to get that in your ply as well. So to minimise that effect happening, what I'm going to do is slide my fingers from the orifice back over the two threads as they're plied, thereby guiding the twist into the yarn, so that way it doesn't just find its own level. Because we tend to ply over a longer distance than we actually spin the singles, you know, if you're spinning singles and you're drafting each little bit at a time, the twist is going in over a very short distance. But when you're plying, the tendency is to do it over a foot or so, maybe more. And if you just allow the twist to run from the orifice to where your backhand is, it will just go in as it feels like it. So if you do have any inconsistencies, it will show up even more so in the plying, because the thicker bits will stay thick and fluffy and the thinner bits will tighten up. So to minimise that, as I say, I'm going to guide the twist in using my front hand. So to start off with, we're using that kind of action. Now if I'm just doing this willy-nilly without thinking about how much twist I'm putting in, there's no guarantee that this is actually going to balance the two single threads. So if I look at that and the time it's taken me to run my fingers from the orifice back to my backhand, that doesn't mean that this is actually a balanced yarn. So if I look at this, I can see that it's actually quite under twisted. Now if I use my magnifying glass and look at it, get some focus on it, I can actually see that the fibre itself is still got Z twist in it, which tells me that it needs to have more plying twist put in to balance it. So if I put in another couple of treadles and see how that looks, that's beginning to straighten up, but it's still very slightly under twisted. So I'll put in another one and that should do it. Now if I actually allow this to drop very slightly, take a little bit of tension off, you might not be able to see it from that distance, but there is actually a little bit of kinking in the yarn. Now that tells me that this yarn is still not happy. It looks a little bit sort of uncomfortable. So if I slide my fingers back a little bit and allow the twist to run a bit further into the yarn, all of that kinking has now disappeared. So it looks as if the yarn has given a sigh of relief. it's sort of relaxed a little bit more. So that tells me that this is now balanced. So my normal habit of plying would be to keep my 2 yarns separated with my backhand, run it over the top of my finger and hold it down with my thumb. If you put a finger in between the 2 plies, all it takes is a little turn of the hand and you're putting a little bit more tension on one of the singles than the other, and you'll end up with a spiral yarn. So we're going to keep the yarn, both singles, the same tension over them. We'll get the wheel going, slide the fingers back to the backhand, and then every once in a while pinch off and let the yarn just drop a little bit. And when I say let it drop, I don't mean bring your hands close together, because it will automatically double back on itself. Because this yarn has been sitting on the bobbins for a while and it's set into its Z twist, the minute you take a lot of tension off, it will automatically double back. So by just letting the tension off it a little bit, you can see where those little kinks are developing. And as soon as those kinks stop forming, I'm going to let that go onto the bobbin. Now, if you were to do this all the way through all of your plying, it would take you forever. So what we tend to do is give yourself a given length of yarn to ply, and then count how many treadles it takes for that yarn to actually be balanced using the technique that we've just looked at. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is balanced now. To double check it, I'm just going to look under the glass. Yeah, now the fiber's running straight as well. So 7 treadles for that length of yarn should do all of it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll just double check that again. Yeah, and that's straight as well. So I'm going to let all of that on. So from now on, I can count 7 treadles, and if I want to actually check it just by looking at that little bit of a drop there, just to see whether or not it's relaxed, I can do that all the way through my plying. Once you've learnt to recognise that little relaxation point of the fibre, you can actually spin anything at all. You can ply anything that anybody gives you. Double check it with the magnifying glass to make sure that the fibre is still lying straight, and you can ply away knowing that your yarn is going to be balanced at the end of the day. Now, when I was taught to ply, I was taught that you ply it, you pull a length off, you double it back like that, and it hangs in a nice neat loop, and that's it plied and balanced. As you can see, that is not the case at all, and particularly if it's been sitting on the bobbin for a long time, and especially if it's something with a high twist. If you've done a very fine yarn with a lot of twist in it, it will automatically double back on itself. So just that little drop there, just to get the tension off it. Okay, so I'm just going to show you the difference between a 2-ply and a 3-ply. So if we look at this, you can see this is a 2-ply. This is actually mohair. So you've got 2 single threads wrapping around each other. Okay, and you can see in between each crossover, where the crossover happens, there's a little indent. Now if we look at a 3-ply, a 3-ply is a much rounder yarn. So if we look at this one, the indents aren't as obvious. So we've got 3 threads put together. That's it untwisted, and that's it back to its normal twist. So it's a much more rounded finish, and it looks like much more like a commercial yarn. So a 3-ply can give you really good definition if you want to make something with cables or something that has a sort of textured pattern, whereas your 2-ply is much quicker to spin because you've only got 2 singles to make, and it can be a lot lighter in feel. So if you have a heavy yarn, something that is a heavier fibre to begin with, sometimes a 2-ply is the better way to go because you can make it a lot lighter. So that's the difference between your 2 and your 3-ply.